every single investor in San Francisco and Silicon Valley said, we're not going to invest in a Miami-based company. You guys should move back to Miami and try to find some investors there. So we were at a crossroads, and that's kind of, I think, what ignited a lot of my...
You meet somebody wealthy? Their family at one point was not wealthy. And then the one shows up. The one. One person changes the family tree forever. In my family, I'm the one.
So we got a new one podcast here. I'm pretty pumped for this one, being a Miami guy. Lived down there, had the company for 2 years. So this is Chris Daniels from Shrimp Society. He is like the man for startups in Miami. And I think this is going to be a cool episode, both to hear about how his story and how he kind of got started in the entrepreneurship world. And then also just like, dealing with entrepreneurs and just learning a lot about the different companies that are kind of out there that he's dealing with. So Chris, do you want to just give like a quick background to yourself, Shrimp Society stuff you're doing right now?
Yeah, for sure. So a little bit of background on me. I was born and raised in Chicago, and then I came to Miami for school, went to University of Miami, and I had to figure out yeah, I got sucked in from the first campus visit. I was like, oh, wow, this is amazing. But before that, I had to kind of figure out a way to help pay for University of Miami because it was really expensive. And so in high school, I started a mulch company called Mulch Maniacs. In the Midwest, mulch is a big deal. Every spring, everyone gets a truckload of mulch delivered and, puts it in around their houses. And so I had an old pickup truck, and I had some football buddies that I could pay a little bit of money and some lunch to do that. So I ended up building Mulch Maniacs, and then I ended up selling that company to help pay for college. And that was kind of my first taste of entrepreneurship. I'd always been the like lemonade stand kid growing up. It was just like something that was always in me to create stuff. And then at University of Miami, I got involved with the Launchpad there, which is the on-campus incubator. So worked as a venture consultant, helping faculty, staff, students with their startups and their businesses. Had a bunch of different startups of my own. Had one in the crypto space in 2017 that we actually got acquired by a public company, and we were really excited about it, and it was awesome. And then a week after we signed the term sheets and everything was set, the company fell apart. The CEO of the public company got indicted on like penny stock fraud, and the whole deal fell apart.
Dude.
And it was this wild journey of untangling ourselves from that company. And then after that, I moved on to be one of the first employees at an early stage cybersecurity startup in Miami called Secveris. And I was kind of the proverbial jack of all trades there, doing everything. I started doing their taxes. That's how I got my foot in the door at the company, because that was my background. And then moved into leading sales and the whole go-to-market motion of the company. And that was just an awesome ride, raising millions of dollars in capital and scaling the team up and doing that. And then that kind of left me with starting the Shrimp Society, which had this big vision to build the Y Combinator of Miami. And I've been in Miami for about 10 years and really saw this ecosystem develop over those 10 years, but I still felt like there wasn't a strong culture for founders, specifically early stage technology founders, from a cultural perspective, from just like what this city's about. Where do these people hang out? How can they become friends? How can they build in community with each other? And so I started the Shrimp Society in 2021 to solve that gap. And we started with a community of about 10 people and then grew that to about 100 people. And then we did a whole NFT membership project, which we could talk about in 2022, which was really fun and really challenging as well. And then we started moving into structured programming, like accelerators and incubators, just kind of based on the demand of the community. And that's kind of what led me to where we're at now. So the Shrimp Society is the education partner for Venture Miami's Built in Miami startup program, which is the biggest startup incubator in Florida. So we're right in the middle of it. We're in week 2, so we're right smack in the middle, and getting stuff done. But that's a little bit about me.
So I want to hit on a couple things, but I guess like just kind of starting at the beginning of that story. A big topic, for the listeners of the podcast is like getting into entrepreneurship. For me at Penn, like student entrepreneurship, like the programs they had were critical. Kind of for just like giving me the idea that it's like doable and that you could do it. A lot of colleges have like good programs. We just had a dude who like raised some money. Cornell has a good one. I talked to another guy, Miami, Kyle Levy, who I think you might know. Unihop is his company. He was talking about kind of that stuff there. I've also like hired a bunch of people who went to Miami and said stuff about like their kind of entrepreneurship thing. So how did that, were you kind of like the lemonade stand type guy where you're thinking about like what you can sell kind of growing up as a kid, or was it something that came in when you showed in Miami?
Yeah, growing up, it was always just how can I create things? How can I build a business? How can I do the lemonade stand that led to the mulch company? And then after kind of seeing how it works, just running that very simple company, right? There's nothing complex. There's no technology. It was wheelbarrows and door-to-door flyers, and being really seeing like how sometimes simple businesses can be and the core fundamentals of it. Then when I got to college, that's when I dove into the tech scene more and built a ton of different apps and hired contractors overseas and just did every pitch competition imaginable. And I think a big piece of that was being involved with our on-campus incubator. So the Launchpad at UM, it's not a part of a specific college. Like it's not in the business school. It's not in the engineering school. And what I found was a lot of, because I took some entrepreneurship classes, but I felt like those they weren't modern for how companies and startups were being actually built. They were kind of having you do 25-page business plans and all of this stuff.
More academic type stuff.
Yeah, much more academic. And I was much more focused on how can we build something this week and launch it on Product Hunt and just see what happens. And kind of take a more of an iterative approach, which is what we teach now in the incubator. But yeah, I think just finding also other people that are interested in the same technology, startups, building things, creating things, tinkering, hacking, that is a huge aspect to being successful, I think, as an entrepreneur.
What's also like it's the fun aspect of it. You know what I'm saying? Like just the collaboration with people. Like that's the part that makes it, kind of worth doing, right? Because it's like that's the building. Exactly. So I totally get how that kind of factored into your companies. I guess so with the company with CoinPlan, how did were you somebody who was like interested in like crypto and like kind of the fintech type stuff? Like how did you even like get involved in that space?
Yeah, so that was the company that we ended up selling, and then it all blew up. And so that started because I was interning for this guy who was trying to build a venture capital fund. And so I was going to the WeWork in Brickell, like taking the metro from campus
in the mall there.
Yeah, exactly. And so and so I met this other guy and I recognized him, and I'm like, oh, you go to UM too, just recognized him. And he was a software engineer, and he was building like trading algorithms, and he was interested in crypto. This was like 2017. And I had been just interested in the space, but not really getting involved. And then he needed kind of like some sales and marketing help. He had the tech side. And so we joined up forces, and then built that company for about 18 months. He went to San Francisco, tried to raise capital there. And a huge part of where launching the Shrimp Society now actually stems from that experience, because that was 2017. We were young. We were doing everything right. We had some early customers. We were building the products. We were following all of like the startup playbooks from Silicon Valley. And we tried to raise capital in Miami, and every single investor told us, hey, that's cool, but you should move to San Francisco and try to fundraise there because that's kind of where the scene is. We're not interested in this stuff. And we said, okay. So we moved to San Francisco and we tried to raise capital there. And we did that for about 3 months, and every single investor in San Francisco and Silicon Valley said, we're not going to invest in a Miami-based company. You guys should move back to Miami and try to find some investors there. So we were at a crossroads, and that's kind of, I think, what ignited a lot of my passion for community building in the Miami tech ecosystem, because it was the problem that I had and that I kind of wanted solved. Getting bounced around and no one really believed in this ecosystem.
Yeah, it's interesting because I do find, like, I was in a couple different ecosystems, like in New York and Philly, Boston, and, you know, in a lot of places, there's like, they're trying to do the accelerator, the tech stars of XYZ city in the Northeast. But with Miami, I guess it's more interesting because there really, you know, that it's an ecosystem that really has blown up as like the kind of tech ecosystem. Was that sort of when you know, the whole post-COVID financial companies moving down to Miami, people who are working remote now, is that when you sort of had this kind of inkling, or was it back when, you know, you were in San Fran? And like, when did you sort of, were you on the trend, I guess, before the kind of big moves?
Yeah, it was right at the start of, I guess, 2020. I was working at that cybersecurity startup, Cyberis, and we were on the 7th floor, and we work in Brickell City Center. And I was on the same floor. Oh, really? Yeah, it was a great floor. I don't know why, but on that floor was Milo Credit, was founded there. They've raised I think, $50 million and are on their way to becoming a huge company. Papa was founded on that floor, and I don't know if you remember that guy, the founder. He had that dog, that pug, that would always run around the 7th floor. And so they're a unicorn now. And so I really felt like, wow, there's like real companies being built here, real unicorn style technology companies being built here. But I was thinking about, okay, all these companies, like, we're all seed funded. Where is the next generation of these companies? Like, where are they hanging out? Where is their community? And there really wasn't one. So that's kind of where the Shrimp Society started. But I do think Miami had its COVID moment, and so many people moved here. And that really changed the game. A lot of people, not a lot, but some people have moved back. I've had friends move back to San Francisco or New York and things like that. But I think we attracted so much mass in that moment that, you know, it made a step change in the ecosystem.
Yeah. So I want to get into you know, just how you launched Shrimp Society and like the whole token offering or the NFT stuff and all of that. But yeah, like, just, I'm one of those people who went to Florida like with the kind of COVID boom and then came back to New York. You know, maybe more of a personal preference than a business thing, but you know, now with it being like a few years out from this kind of pivot, like, do you see it as being like there being like a long, like, obviously there were some tech companies in Miami before COVID, and like, you know, I think it's a strong place for people to go for business reasons due to the Latin America sort of connection, all that type of stuff. But like, do you see that kind of trend reversing or changing at all in terms of the types of companies, you know, post FTX arena blow up and all that type of stuff?
Not really. And an example is, we had last year, we did the first version of the Built in Miami startup program, our incubator in partnership with Venture Miami, and we had 117 founders in that. And I would say I probably knew 30 or 40 of them just from being in the ecosystem and people I knew. This cohort is 260 startup founders, and I don't know any of them. And I go to a lot of networking events. I host a lot of events. And I'm pretty good with names and faces, and I don't know any of these people prior to the start of the program, which is amazing because it's 260 new startup founders building new companies, and that's just who's in our program. That's doesn't count for everybody. So I think there's like a gravitational pull, and I think it's a different culture than what you're going to find in San Francisco and in New York and other tech hubs for sure. I think the people here, there seems to be a little bit more emphasis on like lifestyle and balance. Like, I'm going to work and grind for 80 hours, but I'm also going to enjoy my time and go to the beach and, you know, play volleyball and have a social life too, which I think is different than kind of my friends that are in San Francisco, where they're a little bit more just heads down 24/7, everything. And maybe there's something to be said for that, but I think Miami attracts a certain type of founder that wants to not only build a great company, but also have a strong quality of life.
Yeah. Well, I think also like one thing that I've noticed, at least with, and I went to a couple events at that. I think it's the Lab in Wynwood
Hmm.
or that co-working space and
Yep.
the Refresh Miami stuff. And I feel like the Miami ecosystem is more collaborative, and maybe that work-life balance thing plays into it. But like in New York, you're not going to anybody's like apartment or condo to like work on a business. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
You might
Hmm.
go to like a happy hour or something. But I feel like the Miami founders that I've met were just like more interested in kind of collaborative type of environment, at least compared to like a New York type thing.
Yeah, totally. And compared to San Francisco as well, like I've fundraised for two different companies out in San Francisco and spent a lot of time there. And it
Yeah.
felt like you couldn't, if you're at a happy hour, you couldn't even say the name of your company because someone was going to write it down and start working on a competitor. It felt very competitive
Okay,
there.
got it.
And in Miami, I really haven't felt that in 10 years of being here. It's much more
Really
positive sum mindset of, hey, you're working on a company in ed tech. I'm working on a company in ed tech too. Let's like compare notes. Let's share investors. Let's figure out how we can grow together. And I think that's kind of what's making this movement special.
got it. Okay, cool. So then, just going back to just when you launched Shrimp Society, like did it start out as kind of something different, or like what was the start point?
Yeah. So how do you build the Y Combinator of Miami? I, didn't have access to raise a fund, didn't have that, reputation. So I kind of tried to build it in reverse. So I started with the newsletter, and the first goal was to build up an audience of early stage startup founders. And so I started this newsletter. It's called The Current from the Shrimp Society. And every Friday I would write it. And it was kind of, it was a pretty funny, I think, newsletter. It was very like pointed, and there were jokes
Yeah,
and
yeah.
really covering like the ecosystem and different people and the different events and highlighting up and coming people. So it was very different than what you would read in the in the Miami Herald
Yeah,
technology
yeah.
section. And so grew that newsletter up. And then what I started doing was just reaching out one on one on LinkedIn, set a filter on Sales Navigator for founders that had a company size under 5 people, looked at their funding, and basically got this core group of 10 early stage startup founders that were kind of at the pre-seed range, and just hosted a happy hour, put my credit card down and said, tell me when it hits
Oh,
$100.
nice.
And then we did that. And then from there, it was just like, hey, if you know other founders, invite them to this. And
Sick.
then we grew that to about 100 founders. And those founders are amazing. That's kind of the OG group. And they've gone on to raise like $53 million in capital and
Wow.
built some seriously big companies. One of them notably is Veil VR with John
Okay.
Canavadia. They're the number one game on the Quest Store right now.
Wow.
So it's been fun watching all these people and build their companies and have success over the past couple of years. But from there, then we started doing more events, and what we realized was that we needed to expand outside of just the startup founder in the community,
Right.
because the startup founders in these companies needed talent, they needed marketers, they needed developers, they needed kind of all of the supporting cast. And that's what led us to our NFT membership and everything from there.
Have you always had kind of like like, are you the one doing like the branding and stuff behind this? Because I always thought it was interesting, just like the logo branding, just the name itself, the
Yeah.
stuff that you're doing. I think you have a very good like sense for that. You know what I'm saying? Like it's very like compared to, I'm not going to name any names, but I know like other accelerators where or similar types of concepts for cities where the brand is very kind of boring and generic. And I found what you're doing to be like very unique from a branding perspective. Where did that kind of come from?
Yeah, it's funny. It actually goes back to 2017. That's when the Shrimp Society was kind of first started, with a group of just 5 founders that we would get together for Sunday dinners every Sunday. And the whole concept with the Shrimp Society was, there's 2 parts to it. One, it's when you start your business, you're a shrimp. You're at the bottom of the totem pole. And when I was building Coin Plan, and I would go to all these networking events, these happy hours, talk with these investors, we would get like the pat on the head, like, oh, cute, you guys got a startup, because we were 21 or 22 or whatever it
Yeah,
was.
same.
And
I remember that.
we were shrimp. We were the bottom of the totem pole. And the idea was to bring together everybody that is a shrimp and just trying to make it and share resources and leverage
Nice.
network and all of that together. And then it kind of took on a double meaning as looking at the Miami tech ecosystem and kind of this vision to be the Y Combinator of Miami, because I felt like at that time you mentioned like 2021, COVID, you had all of these big investment firms moving here. You had some big technology companies moving to Miami, and everyone was saying, look at this new startup that moved here. But really, that startup was doing like $100 million in revenue. And they're a startup in their own right. But to me, I'm like, we're missing the shrimp. If we don't invest in supporting, retaining, attracting the early stage founders you're not going to hear about them for 4 years or 5 years, but we have to start attracting them and retaining them in the city now, because ultimately they're going to be the big fish that are making the headlines.
Nice. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's interesting that you kind of built, you already kind of built out the infrastructure or the idea for that way back when. Because I find that like with serial entrepreneurs, it's just a thing where like you're kind of taking an idea between different kind of ventures that you have and sort of like flipping it around, you know what I'm saying? And it's not necessarily in its final form, till later on. So that's pretty interesting. So what were some of like the things from a growth perspective that you did to, scale? Or I guess just blow up in the way you did.
Yeah, we did a lot of, I think the newsletter was good because my grandpa was in the newspaper business, and he told me this story when I was young, that the most successful newspaper in the US, at least when he was doing newspapers, was this really small town newspaper that had like 99% readership. It was just a juggernaut. And their strategy was to include as many people in the town in the newspaper each week. How can you, because if you see your name in the newspaper or hear about it, you're going to read it. And so what I tried to do was highlight other people in the community and other organizations in the community and tell their story. And by that, kind of hack their audience in a way to grow the newsletter and the community from there. So that was one way. And then from the community aspect, it was really referral based. And we also, we had a closed door. So you had to get in, you had to apply. And I think that intrigues
exclusivity of it.
Yeah, that it wasn't just a random free happy hour. There's a lot of those and you can go to them. But if you wanted to be a part of this group, you had to get in and you had to have an impact. And then we also,
which you need to some degree, right? Like if you don't have that, then you're not, the people that could come in are just going to be like kind of half committed. Or
yeah, exactly. And the idea too is it's creating exclusivity for relevancy, because if you say you're a startup founder community for pre-seed stage startups, and then you have a real estate agent in there and someone who owns a contractor business and someone who owns a bakery, the relevance and the conversations aren't as powerful.
It's going to be low.
It's diluted.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the idea. And then we also just did a lot of kind of like guerrilla marketing things. Like we somehow got a big mural in Wynwood, and we would throw events that were themed in certain ways. And it just tried to capitalize on kind of the fun of it all. Like I've always tried to make the organization fun.
Yeah.
Building a startup is hard and stressful, and wanted the Shrimp Society to be somewhere where you can have fun.
Do you, just random aside, do you have any tips as far, I've done some events in Miami and different places, networking events. Like what are some, obviously maximizing attendance, right, is like the priority with these type of events. Like what are some tips or kind of hacks that you've discovered beyond having free alcohol?
Yeah. I think you have to, if it's gonna be some type, like if you're just throwing a party, like a networking event that's just a party, that's kind of a different thing. Then I could talk on that. But if you're gonna do something that's more for a business focused audience, for entrepreneurs, you have to make it worth their time, because you're dragging these people away from their laptop, from their family, from their workout class, whatever it is. So you have to have either the content or the experience has to be good enough to pull them away from that. Like the promise of, if you come here, you are going to learn how to build a B2B go-to-market motion to reach your first $1 million in revenue. And then you got to provide on that. And that could be a 1 hour talk or a 1 hour thing, but I've always tried to provide really tactical content to people. At least that works for the early stage entrepreneurs in our community. I always think of like, what are the buttons you press on the keyboard? That's what I want you to walk out of an event with. Like, okay, I know the theory, I know the strategy, and now I know what buttons to press on my keyboard to make this transformation happen. And so I think if you think about your programming like that can help. If you're just doing a social event, I think having something that differentiates it, whether that's a theme, whether that is a game that you're playing. When people walk in, they're handed a card and they have to find someone with another card. Like, there's kind of these little games you can play to get people to engage each other, because what you don't want is everyone walks into a happy hour, no one knows each other, there's no energy there. You have to kind of force, in a sense, some of the connections to get the event going.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. I guess, do you ever like brush up against competition? I mean, I know you're not like trying to do a monopoly, but if you're going to be like the 500 startups, YCOM of Miami, there's got to be like kind of other people that are like, have you brushed up against, like, I don't know if you look at them as competition or partners or whatnot, but like, is that something that you've kind of dealt with or had to do?
Yeah, I think like earlier, like a couple of years ago, I was much more competitive on that, but I've really changed my stance because we've changed where we sit in the ecosystem too. And so when I think about like the Y Combinator of Miami, I think about like idea stage to MVP, launch, early traction, first fundraising, versus where I think a lot of accelerators sit, which is more like a pre-seed round. So, I think what I've leaned into the incubators and being kind of that 0 to 1 space, because I think there's more people that need help there. And I didn't really like the exclusivity of, hey, we're only going to take 12 people out of 250 that have applied. I felt like a lot of the concepts in 0 to 1, and that's kind of what I'm doing now with the 0 to 1 playbook. A lot of the concepts can apply and could be scaled across a lot of people to get to that MVP launch stage. Then from there, it makes sense to go into an industry specific accelerator or some kind of different program that's going to provide you capital. So I think, we don't have a fund. I think eventually when we have a fund, then maybe competition, it'll be more competitive, right? For stuff like that. But for now, I see kind of the incubator space as our lane. And we even try to be like coach people to go into the other programs in the ecosystem, whether that's Techstars or Endeavor, like go get to this point so you can get into that. And like, that's just our kind of spot on the train tracks.
Got it. How do you just like shifting sort of to just like a business management question, like how do you kind of run this business? Like, how much effort is required? You know what I'm saying? Like how, like, it seems like there would be like a ton of networking, just like talking to people and managing, you know what I'm saying? But like how much how much work is the business?
Yeah, it's taken a lot of different shapes. It's ebbed and flowed quite a bit. So at the start, it was just me, and the biggest leverage I had was our newsletter. And so that was the first time I've kind of written online or had any type of, publication. And it was incredible being able to press send and send a message to 5,000 people that wanted to receive your email, and great open rates and engage and reply. So I've always kind of thought about like, how can we have the most leverage in communication and community building and all of these things? So, having some type of newsletter was huge. Then we moved into, when we did the whole NFT project, we had a pretty big team. I think we had 9 people, 2 full-time. And that was a big team. Learned a lot about just managing teams, especially with contractors and other people and all of that. We had an awesome team retreat in New York. I remember that was like awesome, and setting a big vision and delegating and things. And then it's kind of morphed into really like a lean team of just like me and a couple of part-time contractors that help with things around operations and content, and kind of more of the back office things, whether that's video editing or whatever it is. And then a big piece as well, like in our current programs and the incubator programs, is if you give people jobs, they have more ownership and they're more invested in the thing. So for example, we have accountability groups in our incubator, and I selected 20 facilitators that then have 5 people in their group. And so being able to use this community model to where this facilitator, they're going to get a lot of value out of this, so they're happy to lead the once a week call, because they're upskilling their coaching skills and their facilitating skills. So I think getting community members bought in and letting them run with things that they want to do has been a big way I've kind of scaled some of our reach.
How many, what percentage of the companies that go through the incubator pivot or they don't go through with they don't go past the idea stage?
Yeah, last year we had 117 founders at the start, and we had 42 products launched. That's the goal of our incubator, to launch your MVP product. And so,
got it.
Yeah, I mean, what is that, like 40%, something like that? I think that's reasonable, and it's just part of the process. And
yeah, of course.
What I teach is, like, I don't want you to show up on day one with some prototype that you haven't shown any target customers, spend 50 grand on an MVP, and then launch it to no one who cares about it, right? So unfortunately, the startup entrepreneurship world is tough. Like, not every idea you have is going to actually provide value in the ecosystem that someone's going to want to pay for. So I think that's pretty natural. I am hoping that we're going to launch over 100 companies this year on June 20th at Demo Day. I think that would be awesome.
So how did that kind of the collaboration, I guess, come into play with Built in Miami?
Yeah, so we had done 2 accelerators with about 30 companies each in 2022. These were non-equity accelerators. And I had known the Venture Miami team pretty well, because Burhan, who leads their data science, and now he leads this project, he was in the Shrimp Society. He was in that OG group of 100 founders from a couple years ago. And then I knew Eric Gavin, who's the executive director from the Launchpad, going back to UM. And so they reached out and said, hey, we love what you're doing. We want to have this free incubator for the city of Miami, and we want you to do it. And it was perfect timing too, just because I wanted to lean more into the programming, kind of less into like community stuff, not like I guess like events. From 2021 to 2022, we were kind of in the events business and the community business. And I really wanted to help teach and coach people how to build startups, moving closer towards that Y Combinator vision. So it worked out perfect. And then we finished up last program with just amazing numbers and success all around. And so they said, let's run it back. Let's do it bigger and better. And here we are.
Nice. Mm-hmm. What's the sort of tying everything together? What's like the best part about doing a business in Miami?
It's a good question. I think the best part about building a business in Miami is that the community of entrepreneurs here and the tech community is extremely positive. And that's not what I felt in other ecosystems. Specifically San Fran. I feel like a lot of people were jaded there, and the game was so kind of old and tired there that people were not excited about launching new products. They weren't excited and happy and proud to build new companies. It was just kind of like what we do, and that's cool, and that's all great. But I feel like in Miami, there's a genuine optimism. I'm an optimistic person, so I'm attracted to that, where people are supportive and optimistic and want to see you succeed. And it really feels like everyone's kind of playing on the same team. Like, I don't know, think of like an individual sport, like a tennis team or a golf team or a swim team. Right. Like, we're all on the same team, even though we're all playing our individual games. Yeah. But when someone wins their specific race, the whole community really celebrates it. And I think that's special to Miami.
Yeah. I wonder why that. You think it's just because of the weather, or like what? Because I noticed a similar thing, like with I was involved in that incubator ecosystem in West Palm, the 1909. And I got a similar type of vibe there, like about everybody's kind of in it together. And you're right that's not in like it's totally not the case in other cities. Like, why do you think that? You think it's just because people who are like nicer or more generous, I guess, gravitate to Miami? The weather, like, what do you think? What's the reasoning behind that?
The real reason, I think, is because we're an underdog. And I
Got it.
think, you know, everyone wants, it's one of those like a rising tide lifts all boats. So, like, if your company's super successful here in Miami and you're recruiting all this incredible talent here and building all these, this amazing company and creating notoriety here, it lifts my boat as well. And I feel like, I don't know, naturally, it seems like everyone here got the message and it's just been working. But I think I like playing on underdog teams, and I think it's a lot more fun trying to win the championship instead of trying to hold it off and being jaded and begrudging about it.
Yeah, that underdog thing is kind of interesting because it's just like the people who, when you move to South Florida or Miami, you're always like telling the people back up north, like, you got to come down here. You got to, you're going to like it better. Like, it's a positive, like, life change for you.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? But you are the underdog. They're like, oh, we're in Chicago, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
So I get that makes sense. And everybody's kind of like coming from different places to be in Miami, but it's like, it's the same sort of underdog feeling. Yeah. So that totally makes sense. What, in general, from like seeing all these different entrepreneurs and stuff, like what are some of the biggest mistakes to avoid for people who are in that idea to MVP stage?
Yeah, we just covered this last night. I think there's two big lessons. One is they don't engage in hand-to-hand combat with their target users. So I think a lot of early stage startup founders, they think of them and their company as like here, and their customers are here, and we're not one and the same. Like, they just read my emails and I don't understand them, but they're going to love this. I know they're going to love this. And the best founders that I've seen, they go and engage those people face to face in like quote unquote hand on hand combat
all the time.
And they understand their pains, their anxieties. They understand every single thing. They're like detectives. Yeah. They just understand everything about the person that they're building the product for. And the best ones do that. And the ones that I've seen fail is they try to skip that part with surveys. They send out a survey on LinkedIn. They
don't like the audience. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're not involved in it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not fun sometimes to do that because you're going to show a prototype to someone and they're going to say, I hate it. This is ugly. Like, that's not fun. But if you think of it like every piece of feedback is like feedback from your target customer is just the lifeblood of your startup. And if you don't have that, or you don't have good quality of that, it's just really tough to succeed. So that's one. The other one that I've seen kind of more on like the MVP stage side as people start to go fundraise is they don't run their fundraising process with momentum. And I've seen a ton of founders do this where they say, I'm fundraising, and then you talk to them 6 months later and I'm fundraising still. And they don't have any company momentum and they don't have any fundraising momentum. And fundraising is a completely different beast than a lot of things that people are used to doing in a business sense, because you need to create momentum, you need to create scarcity, and you need to create urgency. And I think founders, that's like a new concept, especially for new founders, because it's kind of in the books or whatever. It's more like, oh, you just talk to investors and then someone invests. And in my experience of building companies and fundraising for companies, that's really not how it works. It's much more of a momentum game. You obviously still have to have a good product and a good company, and that's kind of a part of the formula. But if you're not running your fundraising process like a sales process and incorporating momentum, urgency, scarcity, it's tough to fundraise.
Yeah, interesting. Where can people find you, and what is there like? What's the next cohort that they can kind of sign up for?
Yeah, the next cohort will probably be next year. I would encourage everybody that is in South Florida to come to our demo day on June 20th. We're going to have, over 100 companies demoing there and showcasing their technology. And that's kind of the big graduation party. If you want to get in touch with me, you can reach out on LinkedIn at just Chris Daniels, or on Twitter, I think it's Chris_Daniels27. And
We'll
yeah,
link it.
perfect. And I'm looking forward to taking this curriculum. I spent a year building this curriculum from 10 years of building startups and 3 years of running incubators and accelerators into the 0 to 1 playbook curriculum, and that's what this current program is running on, and we're seeing some great success. So keep an eye out for that as a standalone program in the future. And thanks for having me on, Chris. I appreciate it.
Chris, last kind of bonus question here.
Hit
If you're
me.
like looking to like get wasted in Miami with your fellow co-founders, what is your like number one recommendation of a place to check out?
You can find the Built in Miami cohort and the founders hanging out at Cerveceria La Tropical Brewery in Wynwood. That's one of my favorite spots. We go there all the time after our classes. It's an awesome spot. Live music on the weekend, indoor, outdoor, great food, great beer. I think they have cocktails too. That is definitely a spot to check out.
And what place is overrated or people shouldn't go to?
Oof. Wow, that's a good one.
What's the inside scoop, Chris? Come on, give it to me.
The inside scoop is I'm kind of over Brickle bars. Maybe I'm just jaded.
You're over Blackburn?
Yeah, I'm just over those bars. I think there's better spots in Miami than those bars. I think you got to get into Wynwood and Little River, and I'm honestly a huge fan of Coconut Grove. You can find me there at Regatta or any of those places. Barracudas. I love the Grove. I think it's awesome.
That's a based take there.
Yeah.
But yeah. Sounds good. Cool. All right. This is the One Podcast.
It's the One Podcast. Are you subbed, my G?